We all have memories of waking up early in the morning on a school day, while it's still dark outside, heading towards the lounge room or living room, turning the TV on, followed by rapidly hitting the volume down button to avoid that loud psh 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 sound that happens on those old TVs. If you know, you know. And then booting up the PlayStation 2, and diving head on into the brand new game you got a few days prior. Or maybe that's just a me thing and I'm just old now. Anyway, back then I played the hell out of this game called Dark Cloud, this city building, dungeon crawling RPG that started level 5, company nowadays known for the Ni no Kuni series. And even though I played a lot of games for the PlayStation 2 era, I always came back to Dark Cloud, and yet, to this day, I never quite finished it. It was one of those titles you pump hours into, and then the brand new shiny game came out, like back then it was like the new Ratchet & Clank would drop, and you would just play the hell out of that. And then when you finally come back to that game, you opt to just start from the beginning. Whether that be because you forgot where you were at, forgot how to play the game, or just because you wanted to re-experience it from the beginning again. Unfortunately, I did this countless times to this game, and I really regret it. The game opens with some military general looking bad guy, you know, like the old stereotype evil guy from every game from that era, or show from that era, leading a ritual to summon a dark genie. And of course he succeeds, after giving us some wicked dance scenes. TikTok kids, eat your heart out. We then head to the village of our protagonist, Tone, or Toon, Tolan. Honestly, he's the Link of this universe, so I'm just going to call him Lunk throughout this video. Lunk's village is actually holding a festival at this time, with everyone like dancing, and music playing. Seriously, just watch this. Just such a vibe. Speaking of the music, that's just one of these good things about this game, and just listen to the background music. And of course, unfortunately, the village is attacked by the evil genie, and Hitler, random, not stereotypes, military evil general bad guy dude, leading to everyone in the village, including the buildings for whatever reason, to be sealed in these magical orbs and then scattered throughout the nearby dungeon. That is everyone except for the main protagonist. In typical JRPG fashion, you're the only one left. You even get this dream sequence with the old dude that runs the town coming to you and explaining what you have to do. Once you're actually in the game, the whole point is to explore the nearby dungeon, fighting off bats, skeletons, and other monsters, looting chests and finding secrets throughout the multi-layered dungeon. Each level providing you with another magical orb that you can then take back to the town and place in any way you see fit. This game really does stand out with the way the mechanics work. It's not that often that you see a RPG that also has city building. Everyone loves those sort of things, and yet we don't see many of them. Ni no Kuni obviously has them, but that makes sense because it's level 5 who made this game. The thing is, when it comes to the city building aspects, because you're constantly finding new things in the dungeon and bringing them back, you can place your buildings, and then each building has these little slots where you then place the things that you find in the dungeon into them. Whether it's sometimes you place the NPCs that go towards those houses, allowing them to spawn back in the town. Some of the houses will have things like benches or other miscellaneous things to help towards completing the house. You can even unlock things like trees and rivers to place throughout the town, decorate it how you see fit. It's not the most fleshed out system, but it's the early 2000s and we didn't really see many games outside of actual tycoon games and simulator games that expanded on this. It is an RPG first and foremost. The city building is just a side part to it. I know that it's expanded slightly more on in the second game, but in the first game it's pretty bare bones, but it's still nice enough that you can make each town your own. Now, like I said, the game is first and foremost an RPG, so it does have its own little weapon system, with each weapon having its own durability meter. As you use your weapon, you can actually break them, causing them to be destroyed permanently. Now, I know that does give people anxiety when they're playing games, but honestly, in this game, you're finding plenty of weapons that this doesn't really become an issue. You can also upgrade these weapons. There is a full upgrade system, and in fact, the upgrade system is actually pretty cool for this type of game. You can actually combine multiple old weapons that you're no longer using or you never wanted to use, take the traits from them, and roll them into the type of weapon that you want. Meaning by the end of the game, you can have this legendary sword that's personal to you because you're the one that actually made it. Just don't break it. Also, to go along with this typical JRPG type game, you do actually have allied heroes that you can unlock throughout the game. There is 6 of them in total, each with their own personality and weapon type, and you can switch between them as you're going through the dungeon, such as like, one of them has a big hammer, your main character wields a sword. The first character you actually unlock is a little cat girl. You get this cat that you rescue in the dungeon, you put her at your house, and then it turns out it's a cat girl, because every JRPG has to have one apparently, and her main weapon is a slingshot, giving you your main like ranged character that does help get through areas in the dungeon. Like you need her to help you get to the first boss. Speaking of the boss, every time I see it, I can't think of just that scene from Neverending Story with just the Atreyu. The boss itself is like this big fluffy thing. The boss fights themselves are interesting enough. Like you put into this big boss arena and there's these different things that happen. Like the first boss, when you're fighting him, the ground falls out. So you have to attack the boss from range and also at the same time avoid falling into the holes. Now when it comes to many Japanese games and just a lot of games from the PlayStation era in general, music is always really, really good. And it's no exception in this game. Like the title screen itself is just, oh. If you remember games from this era, when you boot them up normally, you'd have this sort of like mini trailer of the game that would play, the press start button flashing on the screen. And in this game's case, it plays the main theme, which honestly is a nostalgic trip and a half for me. Like to this day, even if I hadn't played this game or remembered this game for years, as soon as I hear that tune, it just takes me back. As you progress through the game, there are actually multiple different towns that you rebuild. Like the second town area is this Deku looking forest where you meet the third playable character, the guy with the hammer. And the dungeon for that area takes place in like these woods. Later on in the games you go into like this more like ruinous area. Now for people that actually really enjoyed this game, we were lucky enough to get a sequel called Dark Cloud 2, or as it's known in Australia, I think in Japan and most places in the world, might have just been the US that it was called Dark Cloud 2. Here in like the PAL region it's called Dark Chronicles, and I never actually got to play that game. The only reason I even knew about it, since we didn't really have the internet back then, was from a demo disc that I got in a like gaming magazine for the news agency. It wasn't a demo for the game itself, it was just the trailer for it, and every time I watched it I went, wait, there's a second game for this? What? And it just looks so different to the first game, and yet it still made me really want it. Honestly, with how expensive it is to get your hands on these old games nowadays, we're lucky enough that Sony put both Dark Cloud and Dark Chronicles on the PlayStation Store. Actually, all the filming for this video was me replaying the game on PlayStation 4, and I'm honestly probably going to get the second game at some point to find the experience and probably make a video on that too, as I've heard nothing but really good things for that. I think most people prefer the second game over the first game. Not to say they didn't like the first game, it has definitely aged, but that's to be expected. I still loved my time replaying this game. I'm sure you're wondering, did I actually finish the game after all these years? Now the real answer to that is Metaforge just dropped, so I've spent a lot of time in that game, and I'm sure I'll return, and definitely not restart from the very beginning again. Hey, if you like these type of chill videos where it's just talking and revisiting old games and old like TV shows and things like that, and you want to see more like them, hit the like and subscribe button, and comment down below if you have any suggestions from some old games. Honestly, while filming this video, I remembered a lot of games that I forgot all about from the PlayStation era, considering most of my nostalgia when it comes to games is from that era. I grew up with the PlayStation 2. Obviously, I played a lot of PlayStation 1, Nintendo 64, things like that, but mine was a PlayStation household. The PlayStation 2 was my first real console. Although I guess we had a Sega, but I just played a lot of Sonic the Hedgehog on that. So when it came to actually playing all these different games like Ratchet & Clank, Jak and Daxter, Sly Raccoon, obviously Dark Cloud, Tony Hawk's, all those sort of things, the PlayStation is just a little time capsule of great games.